Good morning, everyone. So we would like to start our first session. So I would like to invite Yuta Okada on the phenomenon of Iki and the bodily manifestation. Okay?
Yeah. So good morning. My name is Yuta Okada. Today I would like to talk about Kuki Shudo's famous work, The Structure of Iki, Iki no Kozo. So because of the limit of time, I will start with second paragraph of this paper. So in this presentation, I will put Kuki's discussion of Iki in the context of phenomenology. This attempt is, of course, not arbitrary because his discussion stands under the influences from Husserl and Heidegger. Considering that Kuki applied a phenomenological method to his analysis of Iki, considering that Kuki applies a phenomenological method to his analysis of Iki, it should be clarified how his discussion of Iki is phenomenological and what kind of phenomenon Iki is. I'd like to focus on his discussion of natural expressions of Iki, bodied manifestations, 身体的発表. This concrete discussion in which Kuki analyzes the phenomenon of Iki with many examples, to my knowing, seems not to have been focused on from the phenomenological point of view among researchers. In order to show that Kuki's discussion of Iki is phenomenology, I quote the theory of the new phenomenology derived from Hermann Schmidt. I will propose that Iki is a phenomenon of atmosphere in this presentation. The tensive characteristic of Iki. Kuki maintains that Iki consists of the following three moments: coquetry, pride, and resignation. So, first chapter, the tensive characteristic of Iki. Kuki maintains that Iki consists of the following three moments: coquetry, pride, and resignation. He defines coquetry as a dualistic attitude wherein the monistic self sets of the opposite sex. He defines coquetry as a dualistic attitude wherein the monistic self sets the opposite sex against the self and constructs a possible relationship between the self and opposite sex. Coquetry is based on the tensive relationship between two sexes. In one respect, coquetry is an approach to the opposite sex. In another, coquetry demands that the relationship remains dualistic. If the distance between two sexes disappears and the goal of coquetry is completely fulfilled, coquetry loses its tension and disappears. That is why coquetry must remain an absolute possibility. The second moment, pride, in which comes from the ideal of Bushido, is kind of resistance against the opposite sex. This moment plays a positive role in Iki, keeping the relationship dualistic. The last characteristic of Iki, resignation, is an attitude of this interest based on the knowledge of fate released from attachment. This notion originated from Buddhistic thought. This moment also plays an important role in maintaining the distance between the self and the other, but in a negative way. Pride, as a moment of Iki, is a positive posture preventing the dualistic relationship from being unified, and resignation is a negative posture which accepts the situation that the goal of coquetry can never be achieved. It is important for us to notice that these three moments are not independent parts of Iki. We can analyze Iki in terms of three moments, but it is not the synthesis of these three moments. The basic characteristic of Iki is the tensive duality, which forms the first moment, coquetry. And in order to keep the goal of coquetry possible, pride and resignation are necessary. Iki is a kind of coquetry, but its goal is never to be realized. In short, Iki is coquetry for coquetry's sake. Bodied manifestations of Iki. We understand that Iki has a tensive characteristic. How does this characteristic relate to the concrete phenomenon of Iki? In the discussion of bodied manifestations of Iki, we can find the foundation of his discussion of Iki. Kuki says the clearest and greatest variety of natural forms of expression of Iki as bodied manifestation appears in the area of sight. Expressions of Iki as natural forms regarding sight means expressions in the broadest sense, including postures and gestures. As an example, relaxing the body slightly is an expression of Iki that relates to the entire body. We can see this expression in, for example, pictures by Torikiyona. Kuki connects his analysis of this expression with his analysis of Iki as a phenomenon of consciousness. I must skip the quotation. So, bodied manifestation is unsymmetrical and unstable and is based on the tensional character of Iki and expresses the dualistic relationship as the absolute possibility. Tada Michitaro, who discusses Japanese posture, also points out that a Japanese typical posture, the low profile, teishise, includes not only humility but also the possibility of countering. In this posture, we can see a kind of strength and tension. Kuki maintains that coquetry in Western culture is far from Iki because Iki does not approach the opposite sex directly and explicitly, but subtly and implicitly. This contrast to Western culture appears also in art. Wearing thin fabric is, for example, regarded as an expression of Iki. We can see this motif easily in ukiyo-e. According to Kuki's relationship between material causes and formal causes, there is unrealistic ideality as the purpose of Iki. It's expressed in this motif as the openness of the past to the opposite sex by wearing very thin fabric, and at the same time as the closeness of the past by covering the body with fabric. This characteristic in the motif of Iki ukiyo-e is quite different from the motif in the Western pictures, in which coquetry is expressed by covering the naked body with hands. We can find the similar contrast in the motif of bathing. Kuki maintains that a figure wearing yukata simply and casually left after bathing is a kind of figure of Iki, for it describes coquetry and its formal causes as unrealistic ideality, so that the figure wearing yukata reminds us of the naked body. In this case, the tensive character appears in wearing yukata itself, like thin fabric. Here we can see the tensive characteristic of Iki between the present, that is the figure wearing yukata right after bathing, and the past, the naked figure in bathing as the recollecting. The path to the opposite sex is opened so that the figure reminds us of the naked body. However, the path to the opposite sex is at the same time closed because it is a recollection, that is, the past. That is why this figure shows the tensive characteristic of Iki. We can easily find this figure as motif in ukiyo-e, where the naked body or bathing is one popular motif in Western painting. The figure right after bathing is a popular motif in ukiyo-e. We may summarize the characteristic of Iki in terms of the bodied manifestations generally as following: the tension between bareness or nakedness and covering, and the tension between relaxation and strength. This characteristic, as we have already seen now, appears in figures and gestures. Iki and Atomosphere. Finally, I'd like to put Kuki's discussion of Iki in the context of phenomenology with the aid of the new phenomenology. Hermann Schmidt proposes the unique body theory. His main idea is body self-finding. He distinguishes body from physical body from 2 points of view. First, the difference between them is their spatial place. Physical body has a relative place which is determined or identified by relationship with other spaces. We can indicate, for example, that my hand is on the desk, or I am standing a few yards to the left of the station. If you close your eyes, you cannot indicate the relative position of your hand. Body, on the other hand, has an absolute place, which is not determined by physical positions and determined independently of the spatial orientation. Even if you close your eyes, you can find or feel where your hand is which means that your hand is actually independent from relationship with other position in this case. This special difference between physical body and body appears also in the field of experiences. We can feel physical body physically by seeing or touching it, namely by perception, whereas we cannot perceive body objectively. Schmidt insists that being bodied is self-finding of the absolute place. According to him, body is bodied self-finding in the absolute place. This self-finding is classified in two levels, the integrated level and the divided level. When I am here, I find myself bodied in the absolute place, in the integrated level. Body self-finding in the integrated level appears, for example, in surprise, weariness, or pleasure, because their feelings are surrounding our body. In fact, we cannot indicate what part of our body is surprised, pleasured, and so on. On the other hand, when I have a pain in my stomach, I find myself bodied in the absolute place, in divided level. Body self-finding in the divided level appears in the pain, hunger, and so on. Of course, my stomach here is different from the stomach in the relative place. One of the important differences between the relative place and the absolute place is whether we can set the boundary or not. As I mentioned, the relative place can be physically determined by the relationship with other places. We can say, he is now 100 meters from the Kyoto station. However, it may be impossible that we indicate the boundary of our pain. Although I can say that I have a pain in my stomach, I cannot detect the range of my stomachache because my stomachache is radiating in my body. The part of body which appears in self-finding in divided level are called the islands of body by Schmidt. According to Schmidt, emotions are also bodied. Emotions are not the state of mind, but the atmosphere affect our mind as we can sense corporeally. Atmospheres of emotions are surrounding us, and we can grasp them like climates. In his theory, body and emotions are closely combined. So, また時間。
もうギリギリ、もうコンクルージョンに行った方がいいと思う。
はい。
すいません。
So so this body self-finding has two tendencies, so go to narrowness and go to expanse. Then, so in this way, body and so in this way, we can characterize Iki as an atmosphere, which is surrounding us corporeally. Iki is neither property which belongs to a person and an object nor an individual state of mind. Iki spreads widely as an atmosphere surrounding us or place with its tensive characteristic. So that is why I suggest that Iki is an intersubjective phenomenon as atmosphere. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I have like a question from Professor Okada. I'm going to read it out for the people at the floor. So Galen Kopp was saying that, could you explain your reason for translating sich befinden as self-finding? I have never thought of befinden as to find or finding. So he is asking you more of a translational question.
Okay, thank you for question. So I translate befinden is self-finding. This concept of befinden comes from Heidegger's word Befindlichkeit, and this is Befindlichkeit is the German word sich befinden. It finds myself or find self means it means that we find ourselves in some situation with Stimmung. How do you say in English? Stimmung.
Stimmung is mood. Is it mood?
Mood, yeah. Mood, yeah. So that's why. So Hermann Schmidt uses this concept originated from Heidegger's word, so that is why. So I choose befinden as the translation, self-finding. Is it answer?
Professor Kuma was saying that stimulus mood, and you got it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Is there any other question from the floor?
I'd like to ask a question to Mr. Okada, Professor Okada. I don't know much about Iki, so this might be a bit of a superficial question. But my impression when I listened to your explanation of what Iki was, is that, for starters, it seemed like a very essentialist or reductive version of East and Western art. There are lots of pictures in ukiyo-e of naked women. There are lots of pictures of robed after the bath people in Western art. It doesn't seem like a very clear distinction to me, the way it was presented. And it also seems very heteronormative in the way it was presented. Why is it presented as the opposite sex rather than just the other, the self and other? Those might be superficial presentation issues, but I'd like to hear your comment about it.
Okay, thank you. So maybe your question relates to one side, to Cookie's motivation, maybe. So the structure of Iki is written originally in French when he was in Europe, yeah, and he wanted to explain he thinks that the Japanese tradition is misunderstood in Europe, and he would like to explain or clarify the Japanese tradition with help of Western concept. So this point is, for example, Heidegger finds it problematic. And why not the other, but the opposite sex? This is different point. I think, in my opinion, Iki is also so for the other, so not the opposite sex, but also for the other. Simply, we can say. Yeah, this is my answer.
Okay.
Okay.
Just a matter of time.
Yeah.
Slight follow-up. Was Kuki then engaged in sort of the Meiji era? I guess this is slightly post-Meiji, isn't it? But was he engaged in that sort of process of cleansing away things like shunga, in which there was a lot of naked bodies in ukiyo-e, but those things were repressed? And was he involved in some sort of he wants to explain Japanese art, but not that art. And we are different than the West because we don't do that, but actually we did. And I'm wondering about that. Was it a cleansing process?
Okay, thank you. I can't answer now, but I think interesting point. Thank you.
Okay, can I just take the microphone away from you guys? I think we have to keep on discussion, but I'm sorry, but because of the time, I think we're going to head into I'm going to, coffee break. Okay, so I think we're going to resume at 10:30 Japan time. So we'll be having like 20 minutes break. So, thank you so much for the interesting discussion.